The sick plan to cover up her murder. The heartbreaking case of Madeline Soto. Not only does the case of Madeline Soto shine light on the terrible effects of domestic abuse, but it also comes to light the terrifying extent that some persons would go to in order to conceal their heinous acts. This is a really tragic story that sheds light on both of these things. It is quite sad that Madeline Soto's lawsuit was brought about, given the circumstances. Madeline, a young lady who was 24 years old, was full of anticipation for the prosperous future that was waiting for her in the years to come. The contagious laughter, the gentle nature, and the unrelenting tenacity that she possessed brought her a great deal of notoriety. She had lately secured a promising job with a non-profit organization that was dedicated to providing aid to children who came from disadvantaged circumstances. In addition to having recently graduated with a degree in sociology from a famous educational establishment, she had also recently obtained a job with the organization. For the most part, it appeared as though her life was heading in the right direction up until the point where she made contact with Victor Alvarez. In the beginning of the talk, Victor, a man who was 28 years old and had a troubled history, gave the impression of being courteous and attentive. He was also attentive to what was being said. Despite the fact that he was a guy who was intelligent and articulate, his darker inclinations were hidden by the attractive atmosphere that surrounds him. He was the kind of person who could express himself easily. Madeline's friends and family initially welcomed him into their lives because they were under the impression that he would be a positive influence on Madeline's life. This was the reason why they first welcomed him into their lives. However, within a short period of time, it became evident that Victor was a genuine individual. This realization came about as a result of the fact that he was acting in a more possessive manner toward Madeline. She was isolated from her family and friends. Her phone was constantly being monitored. Her movements were being restricted, and he was constantly putting her down on her own self-esteem. The entirety of these aspects were incorporated into his behavior. Even though these warning signs were present, Madeline, like a large number of other people who have been victims of domestic abuse, found herself trapped in a vicious cycle of fear and manipulation. This is something that I have experienced myself. Over the course of several years, both the frequency of the abuse and the severity of it increased until they reached peak levels. As time went on, it became increasingly difficult to anticipate Victor's violent outbursts, which may have potentially hazardous repercussions. As a means of ensuring that Madeline would remain silent, he repeatedly threatened and physically intimidated her from time to time. This was done by him in an attempt to coerce her into maintaining her silence. Despite the fact that she was terrified, Madeline persisted in her efforts to keep her life as normal as possible. She did this in spite of the fact that she was fearful. The fact that her coworkers saw changes in her conduct was not the motivating factor that kept her from continuing to show up for work. Over the course of several years, she became increasingly reclusive and made frequent appearances at her place of employment, exhibiting apparent signs of anguish. Aside from that, she became more reclusive. Madeline would always tell her concerned acquaintances that she was ill during the entire chat, even when they were concerned about her well-being and wanted to know if everything was well. She was unable to expose the truth because she was too terrified of Victor's retribution to do so. Madeline revealed to her best friend, Sarah, about the severity of the cruelty that Victor had inflicted on her after she had passed away. This conversation took place in the weeks leading up to Madeline's passing. Sarah was known to provide Madeline with a great deal of encouragement. Nevertheless, she was unable to escape because she was unable to move because she was paralyzed by fear of what Victor may do. It was very evident that she intended to flee the situation. Madeline was strongly persuaded by Sarah, who was upset by the revelations, to seek protection from the authorities and to go to them. Sarah was concerned by the allegations. It was unfortunate that Madeline's worst concerns were materialized, and it was even more unfortunate that this occurred before she had the chance to put her recommendations into effect. According to the neighbors, Madeline's apartment was the source of a commotion that was heard by the neighbors who lived in the surrounding area on a chilly evening in November. The neighbors say that they heard the noise in the aftermath of hearing the noises of a heated disagreement, which was then followed by a terrible silence before the argument came to an end. They came to the conclusion that they should immediately contact the authorities. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, they discovered Madeline's lifeless body inside of her bedroom. Madeline's body had been discovered before their arrival at the scene. The search for Victor was unsuccessful in every opportunity that was presented to them. A note that had been written in a haste and placed on the bedside was the first thing that was done to make the scenario appear as though it was a suicide. This note was placed on the nightstand. A message like this was left at the side of the bed. At the same time that this was taking place, the authorities were swiftly made aware of any abnormalities that were taking place. More evidence indicating a disagreement had taken place in the room was provided by the fact that the note was not written in Madeline's handwriting. This was in addition to the fact that the room was disorganized. According to the results of the autopsy, it was determined that Madeline had sustained a number of injuries as a result of blunt force and signs of strangulation, both of which are not consistent with the idea that she committed herself. Additionally, additional evidence that was harmful to the case was discovered as a result of further inquiry. When Madeline was using the phone, it was revealed that Victor had sent her a lot of SMS that contained language that was threatening. Both his goals and the influence he had on her were discussed in the writings, which supplied information about both. Experts in digital forensics were able to restore emails and communications that had been destroyed, which provided a clear picture of the abusive relationship and the growing threats. It was professionals working in the field who were able to retrieve these emails and communications. When it came to disguising his illicit behavior, Victor was exceedingly careful and cold-blooded in his approach. He pursued this course of action in an effort to safeguard his reputation. Someone had fabricated a story. Madeline's assets had been changed, and her digital traces had been altered. All of these things had been done. Each and every one of these things had been done with the intention of causing the investigators to become confused. In spite of this, the painstaking work that was done by the forensic team, in conjunction with the testimonies of Madeline's friends and family, was able to completely shatter the well-crafted facade that he had established during the investigation. During the time when Victor was attempting to abandon the state, he was taken into custody at the residence of a member of the household. Due to the overwhelming nature of the evidence that was presented against Victor, there was no space for doubt. In the course of the trial, those who were closest to Madeline were compelled to go through the ordeal of reliving the sorrow of her death through the vivid recital of her anguish. This was a difficult experience for them to go through. They must have gone through a difficult process in order to accomplish this. Despite this, the prosecution was successful in its contention that Victor's actions were premeditated and motivated by a desire to exert control over Madeline, even after he had passed away. This was the case despite the fact that Victor had passed away sometime in the future. Although the defense attempted to depict Victor as a disturbed guy who acted out a moment of passion, the prosecution was successful in its argument. Victor was found guilty of the crime. After listening to the distressing evidence and taking into consideration the facts that could not be contested, the jury came to the conclusion that Victor was the individual who was responsible for the murder charges in the first degree. After being sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Victor was positive that he would never again be able to have the potential to cause harm to another person. This was because of the imposition of the sentence. In spite of the fact that justice was carried out, many who knew and loved Madeline did not experience a great deal of contentment as a result of the resolution of the issue. For the purpose of offering assistance to victims of domestic violence and raising awareness about the warning signs and risks associated with violent relationships, her family and friends established a foundation in her name. This was accomplished through the process of channeling their grief into advocacy. The heartbreaking story of Madeline Soto serves as a potent reminder of the hidden pain that many people go through behind closed doors. It also serves as a poignant reminder of the crucial requirement of providing support to victims and taking action before it is too late. The efforts that her loved ones are making to prevent such tragedies from occurring to other people are turning their suffering into a driving force for positive change. This is a direct result of the work that they are making. It is through this that her legacy will continue to be conveyed to future generations. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.